I'll start by saying there are many ways to describe the latest CRTC ruling on streaming services, but let's start with the obvious one. This is wild. It's wild, but not all that surprising. Conservatives warned that this would happen. We warned that the Online Streaming Act was never just about making Netflix and others pay their fair share. The real issue was always much bigger. The government handed the CRTC broad new authority over the internet and then asked Canadians to trust that the regulator wouldn't go too far. Well, here we are. They've decided that streaming services like Netflix and Disney and Amazon and others must spend or contribute 15% of their Canadian broadcasting revenues towards Canadian programming. That includes the 5% payment already imposed in 2024, which several major streaming companies are still fighting in court. If the government believes that this ruling has gone too far, perhaps, like us Conservatives do, it does have options at its disposal. It can direct the CRTC to change course. It can bring forward legislation to narrow or repeal these powers that it gave them. It can stop pretending this is someone else's problem. But what it cannot do is hand the CRTC a blank check over to streaming and then deny responsibility when the bill is passed on to Canadians. So let's be clear with what is happening here. The government is taking the old Canadian broadcast model built for cable boxes, rabbit ears, licenses, and cable packages and trying to stretch it out over the entirety of the internet. Now, the CRTC says this is going to create far more money for Canadian content. And on the surface, Mr. Speaker, that sounds absolutely wonderful. Why would we not want more money flowing to Canadian content? And no one in this House, including myself, is against Canadian stories, Canadian artists, Canadian actors, Canadian writers, Canadian directors, Canadian musicians, and all of the people behind the scenes who make the industry work. We all support Canadian creators, but this is not the debate. The question is whether supporting Canadian creators requires another unnecessary and costly tax while Canadian consumers are paying more for their services. Because make no mistake, as much as the government likes to claim, this is not just free money becoming available. Streaming companies are not charities. When the government makes it more expensive to operate in Canada, there are only a few places in which that money can come from. It can come most likely from higher subscription services and prices. It can come from fewer services. It can come from less choice, or it can come from reduced investment in Canada. But it will come from somewhere, Mr. Speaker. That's the part that defenders of this scheme always seem to skip. They talk as if the government has discovered a new cultural oil well. Lower the bucket, haul up the cash, and just sprinkle it around, and everything is going to be fantastic. But what they have really done is impose a new cost on platforms that Canadians already pay for, and then pretend that that cost is never going to show up on anyone's bill anytime in the future. This is the Looney Tunes type of rhetoric that the government likes to project on taxpayers. Costs are never costs. Taxes are never taxes. It's always a framework, a contribution, a modernization, a flexible approach. But flexible for whom, Mr. Speaker? It's flexible for the lobbyists who know how to work the system at the expense of citizens. It's flexible for the established players who know how to fill out the forms, meet the specific definitions, hire the right consultants, and navigate the maze that is the CRTC. But for the family watching their monthly subscriptions go up yet again, it's not that flexible at all. People are and have left cable for a reason. They wanted choice. They wanted control over what they consumed. They wanted a service that could bring a little bit of joy at the end of their busy days. The internet is not cable with Wi-Fi. It is a completely different world. The old broadcasting system was built around scarcity. There were only so many frequencies, so many channels, so many licenses, and so many time slots available. And that's why the old system was built around quotas and licenses and mandatory contributions and rules about what had to be shown. The internet functions entirely differently, as we all know, Mr. Speaker. It is built around abundance, endless shelf space, endless choice, endless competition. Millions of creators reaching audiences directly without needing permission from a broadcaster or a regulator. A small creator in Winkler with a camera can reach an audience. A musician in Portage can create a song and put it online. A podcaster in Morden can speak directly to listeners anywhere in the world. They do not need to wait for a broadcaster to discover them. That is not a loophole in Canadian culture. That is Canadian culture in the modern world. And it does not stop at money, Mr. Speaker. The CRTC is also getting involved in something called discoverability. Now, discoverability might sound harmless, but on the internet, discoverability is everything. It is about what appears on the homepage, what gets recommended to you, what shows up in your search, what gets suggested next, what becomes easy to find, and what gets buried. So when the government starts saying that certain content must be made more discoverable, the question becomes simple. More discoverable because viewers asked for it, or more discoverable because the regulator nudged the platform into pushing it? Now, this is no small question, Mr. Speaker. On streaming platforms, the recommendation system is the store. It's the shelf, it's the front window, it's the clerk saying, hey, you may also like this. When government starts directing how content should be presented, promoted, searched, and surfaced, it is no longer just funding Canadian creators. It is getting involved in what Canadians are nudged to watch. That should make people uncomfortable, because this should not be the job of the government. This Liberal government has already pushed through enough censorship legislation and had advocated for more control in the lives of Canadians. Nobody is wanting the government to further interfere in what they watch alone at home or with their families. I believe that culture is strongest, Mr. Speaker, when people choose it freely. It is definitely not when the government puts its thumb on the scale and then congratulates itself for creating demand. The more government regulates online culture, the more it starts deciding what counts as Canadian culture in the first place. A show is not treated as Canadian simply because Canadians like it, or whether it's a Canadian story. It has to pass through a maze of ownership rules, spending rules, rights rules, and points for approved jobs behind the scenes. The entire purpose of streaming was that people could watch what they wanted, when they wanted it, and definitely not without the government interfering in it. The government will say it's about fairness. Canadian broadcasters have had to contribute to the system for decades, so foreign streamers should contribute too. And that's frankly the strongest argument, Mr. Speaker. But Netflix did not break Canadian broadcasting. Disney did not break Canadian broadcasting. Spotify did not break Canadian broadcasting. The internet changed, as well as its viewers, its advertising, and its technologies. People got used to choosing what they wanted instead of paying for a bundle of things that they didn't want to watch. And there's also, of course, a serious trade issue here, Mr. Speaker. Companies such as Apple and Amazon and Spotify have already challenged the 5% ruling from the CRTC and is still before the courts. And the United States has raised trade concerns regarding this decision. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce has criticized the CRTC's move, arguing that the rules target American streaming services and interfere with platform operations. Now, this is not some fringe organizations on the sideline, Mr. Speaker. That is the organized voice of major American businesses looking at the Canadian regulatory system and raising concerns. And this lands, of course, at the worst possible time because, as we know, we are heading into a CUSMA review. Our economy depends heavily on keeping access to the American market stable and predictable. And at a time that our trade relationship with the United States is already uncertain, the CRTC has handed the American negotiators a fresh grievance to use. Why are we making Canada look more complicated, more expensive, and more hostile to digital investment? This Liberal government should be trying to attract investment instead of giving reasons to scare it away. The defenders of this scheme will say it helps Canadian creators, which is partially true. Some established producers will benefit, some people who already know how to navigate the system and exactly where to line up. But what about the independent Canadian creator building an audience on YouTube, on Spotify, on Patreon, a TikTok, or a podcast? What about the Canadian filmmaker who gets global backing but does not fit neatly into the CRTC's preferred category? What about the next generation of Canadian creators who do not want to wait at the gate? They want to build, they want to publish, they want to stream, they want to sell, they want to perform, and they want to compete. There is a much easier way to support Canadian creators. We make it easier to produce content here. We attract more investment. We keep our taxes competitive. We remove barriers and we open markets. Let Canadian stories reach audiences in their living rooms, at home, and around the world. We cannot build a cultural industry by giving government more power over the internet. I strongly support Canadian content, and we should absolutely celebrate it. But, Mr. Speaker, Canadians are not children. They do not need the government hovering over the remote control. Canadian culture and Canadian wallets would be better served if government got out of the way.